The sun scorched the desert as hurried footsteps cut through the morning silence. You may not see it yet, but there are invisible hands guiding every choice, every betrayal, every downfall. Joseph stared at the horizon, his heart heavy as his brothers' whispers turned into conspiracy. They had no idea they were tracing the path God had already prepared. And that's when the heart aches, when the pain comes from those we love. Because sometimes what breaks us is exactly what shapes us. Rejection, abandonment, the echo of contempt, all are silent instruments in God's workshop. The promise hidden in suffering is that every tear, every moment of injustice is being used to shape character, faith, and purpose. Do you feel forgotten? That the world has turned its back? Maybe, just maybe. God is writing the story no one else sees, using every stone along the way to build the throne of tomorrow. And it is in this waiting, in this apparent silence, that the heart learns to trust, to surrender, and to understand that divine delay is never denial, but preparation. If this word touched your heart, write in the comments below what God is showing you in this process. Maybe your faith today will be the answer someone needs tomorrow. Like the video and follow the channel. Each new message is another step on this journey of purpose. The Egyptian market teemed with colors, aromas, and murmurs. But Joseph, now far from the land of his parents, felt the weight of loneliness like an invisible cloak. Perhaps no one notices, but when the heart feels betrayed, the whole world seems to conspire against us. And that's precisely when God begins to silently turn the tide. A messenger approached with words that seemed to whisper promises and warnings at once. "Trust what you cannot see," said the eyes of destiny, hidden in every human gesture. Yesterday's betrayal, the abandonment of brothers and friends, began to take on a meaning that Joseph could not yet comprehend. Because sometimes the turning point isn't announced. It emerges in moments of tension, in the stillness that precedes the storm. Every choice that seems to destroy us, every door that closes, is a framework for the revelation that is approaching. Hope blossoms in silence, and even when the world seems to be falling apart, God's invisible hand moves pieces that will only be recognized later. Maybe you're experiencing something similar right now. Doors closing, people turning their backs, the future uncertain. But maybe, just maybe, every hardship is a prelude to something much greater. Every silence is a lesson, every obstacle is preparation. If this reflection touched you, share in the comments the discovery the Lord brought you today. Let the light that is emerging in your life inspire others to see purpose, even in adversity. The wind blew over the hills of Canaan, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and the distant murmur of the flock. Joseph walked alone, his eyes fixed on the horizon that mingled with the sky. Perhaps you've never felt the weight of looking to the future, unsure if there will be a return, unsure if the steps we take are recognized. That's exactly how Joseph felt, betrayed by his own brothers, sold as merchandise, and thrown into a world that didn't belong to him. And this is where history begins to teach us, because sometimes abandonment and pain are the framework for the greatness God has already planned. Every act of injustice, every look of rejection, every door that closes is a silent opportunity for God to work behind the scenes. What seems like loss is, in fact, preparation. Joseph arrived in Egypt with few possessions, but with his faith intact, carrying within him a flame that no amount of contempt could extinguish. And it is in this flame that we find the first echo of purpose. Even amid rejection, there is an invisible force guiding our steps, connecting the past to what has not yet been revealed. Perhaps you are experiencing something similar, hurt by those you loved, forgotten by those you were supposed to protect, confused about your own life. And this is where the biblical narrative of Joseph becomes relevant for us today. Every detail of his journey is a reminder that God works through human relationships. Parents, siblings, teachers, friends, each bond is a channel for teaching faith, patience, and resilience. And even in prison, even in solitude, Joseph began to realize that each hardship was creating a bridge to restoration, to the fulfillment of a greater purpose. You may feel like your steps are small or insignificant, but every moment of waiting, every hardship endured, is preparing something extraordinary. Joseph's life invites us to look beyond the immediate, to realize that God's delay is never denial, but rather the careful construction of character and purpose. If this story lit a light in your heart, share in the comments how God is shaping your journey. Let this reflection inspire others to recognize God's work, even in pain and waiting. Every small act of faith can become the bridge that transforms suffering into redemption, a tear into purpose, and abandonment into a calling. The ship carrying Joseph to Egypt cut slowly through the sea, each wave breaking as if whispering ancient secrets. You may not realize it, but there are times when life throws us into turbulent waters, tearing us away from everything familiar. Joseph felt the chill of uncertainty, the weight of loneliness, and the distant echo of his brother's betrayal hammered in his mind. And that's when the heart begins to learn, because sometimes the first test is not external, but internal. Each new face he encountered seemed to measure his vulnerability, and every human gesture carried the possibility of rejection or acceptance. But God, silent and invisible, moved events with divine precision. Sometimes, just sometimes, what seems like an insurmountable obstacle is actually a master in disguise. Joseph began to realize that fidelity to his integrity would be the beacon that illuminated paths not yet visible. In Potiphar's house, every task, every glance, every daily command became a veiled lesson. Human power is limited, but the divine acts in layers unseen. And it is there that we learn that relationships, even seemingly trivial or unfair ones, are channels through which God shapes character, strengthens faith, and prepares for the future. Perhaps you're going through something similar, a new environment, difficult people, challenges that seem to crush your will. But maybe, just maybe, God is using each circumstance to shape who you are, to teach you that patience and quiet obedience are the seeds of greatness. The injustice Joseph suffered, though painful, became the stage for his elevation. And even when our hearts are filled with doubt, the biblical narrative reminds us, no circumstance is beyond the reach of divine purpose. Every humiliation is a step toward wisdom. Every apparent failure is a preparation for redemption. And every moment of silence is an opportunity to hear God's voice, which whispers through waiting, abandonment, and adversity. If this story resonated with you, share in the comments how faith has guided your journey. Let this reflection inspire others to realize that even in the toughest trials, there is a divine purpose in every step, every tear, and every challenge we face. Perhaps your perseverance today will be the light someone needs tomorrow. Potiphar's house was silent in the early hours of the night, except for the distant echo of footsteps and creaking doors. You may never have felt the weight of a soul-testing gaze, but Joseph was facing a test that went beyond tasks and responsibilities, the temptation that approaches when no one is watching. And that's when the heart learns to discern, because sometimes the danger doesn't come from without, but from what tries to corrupt our fidelity from within. Every gesture, every false smile, every whispered word carried the promise of immediate gratification and the threat of loss of integrity. Joseph felt the tension, the conflict between desire and obedience, and understood that maintaining faith is not just believing in God, but living what He teaches even in the most difficult moments. Perhaps, just perhaps, the temptations we face today are God's instruments to strengthen character and define identity. The human heart is fragile, but divine strength is invisible and constant. Joseph chose not to yield, even when rejection seemed inevitable, even when human injustice loomed like a shadow. Each choice to remain faithful, to refuse shortcuts that seemed easier, was a silent declaration of trust in the greater purpose God had already laid out. Perhaps you find yourself faced with decisions that test your faith, faced with paths that promise ease, but demand your integrity. But maybe, just maybe, every resistance, every silent renunciation is a step toward building a future where God transforms pain into redemption, rejection into elevation, and silence into revelation. And when the unjust accusation finally came, Joseph realized that even human injustice can serve the divine plan. What seemed like defeat became preparation, the shadow of betrayal, a lesson in patience, and apparent failure, an opportunity for God to reveal his faithfulness and hidden purpose. If this reflection touched your heart, share in the comments the experience in which God taught you to endure with faith. Allow others to see that every choice of integrity, even in adversity, is a bridge to the fulfillment of divine purpose. Perhaps your quiet courage today will be the beacon someone needs to stand firm tomorrow. The desert wind seemed to sing ancient secrets as Joseph walked through the silent corridors of Potiphar's house. Every task completed, every look of suspicion or approval was a veiled lesson in patience and fortitude. You may not realize it yet, but there are times when life takes us to places that seem to diminish us so that we can grow in silence. Joseph felt the invisible pressure of circumstances, the weight of injustice and loneliness, but something within him remained steadfast. Faith is not a moment of great triumph, but a succession of silent choices, choosing integrity when no one sees, keeping a pure heart when everything conspires against it, trusting in God when hope seems slim. And that's where we learn. Sometimes true victory is enduring, resisting and walking courageously even without understanding. Every difficulty, every setback, every apparent failure was a piece in the mosaic of divine purpose. Joseph's life reminds us that God works behind the scenes, transforming pain into wisdom, rejection into growth, and silence into revelation. Perhaps today you're feeling the pressure of something that seems to crush your dreams or test your faith. But every conscious step of faith, however small, is shaping an inner strength that no one can take away. And as the days passed, Joseph began to realize that adversity was not just a test, it was a channel for transformation. What seemed like human defeat was, from a divine perspective, a building block of character, preparing him for greater challenges and the glory to come. Embrace this learning moment and reflect on how each silent challenge can be shaping the person you will be tomorrow. Inspire someone close to you with your resilience and share a word that has transformed your heart. Let your story of faith become a living reminder that even in trials, God is shaping greater purposes. The shadows of night invaded the silent corridors of Potiphar's house, and Joseph felt each moment as if it were a test of his own heart. You may not realize it, but there are times when life forces us to confront not only others, but ourselves. Conflicts arise not to break us, but to reveal the depth of our trust in God. Every suspicious look, every subtle comment seemed like an impossible obstacle to overcome. But Joseph was already beginning to understand something essential. True faith does not depend on human approval, but rather on fidelity to what God whispers to the heart. Sometimes, what seems like unbearable pressure is, in reality, the fire that strengthens and purifies, making us firm and resolute in the face of future challenges. He learned to look beyond apparent injustice, to perceive God's invisible hand guiding every step. Every difficult situation became a lesson in patience, every conflict an opportunity for spiritual growth. Joseph's journey shows us that even in hostile environments, it is possible to flourish when trust in God remains intact. Perhaps today you're surrounded by situations that seem to crush your hope, people who don't understand your vision, moments when everything seems to be conspiring against you. But even in these days, every choice to keep the faith, every gesture of patience and integrity is a spark of light that reveals your greater purpose. Allow yourself to recognize these small victories of courage and faithfulness. Inspire someone to believe that even in difficult times, there is an invisible path that God is preparing. Share your experience of overcoming and let your perseverance be a silent testimony of God's presence in every challenge you face. The sun reflected off the walls of Potiphar's house, casting shadows that seemed to dance to the rhythm of Joseph's worries. Perhaps you've never felt the weight of injustice so close to home, but there are times when the world seems to turn against us, and life exacts its toll on us for every mistake we haven't even made, and that's when we learn. Because sometimes pain and humiliation are the instruments God uses to shape our inner strength. Joseph faced each difficult situation with a mixture of fear and determination. Each silent accusation, each misunderstanding seemed more than he could bear. But the light of faith, however small, illuminated the hidden path. Sometimes the darkness that surrounds us is not abandonment, but preparation for something we cannot yet see. Adversity reveals character, and each firm choice in the face of injustice is a silent affirmation of trust in God. Perhaps today you're dealing with situations that seem unfair, people who judge without understanding, or circumstances that don't make sense. But like Joseph, each challenge is a step toward spiritual maturity, an opportunity to strengthen patience, resilience, and faith. His story reminds us that God works even in the shadows, preparing the heart and guiding each step toward a greater purpose. Reflect on your own journey and notice the small signs of hope that emerge, even in the most difficult times. Inspire others by sharing moments when your quiet faith brought clarity and strength. Let your story be a living reminder that even injustice is used by God to open invisible doors of growth and redemption. The silence of the night was profound, broken only by the whisper of the wind in the windows of Potiphar's house. You may not realize it, but in moments when all seems lost, there are subtle echoes of hope that God places around those who trust. Joseph, even trapped by loneliness and injustice, began to hear these whispers. Each difficult day, each suspicious look, became a silent reminder that nothing escapes divine providence. He felt a mixture of fear and anticipation in his chest. Perhaps no one understands, but true hope isn't the absence of challenges, it's the certainty that God works behind the scenes, transforming every difficulty into preparation for something greater. Every gesture of kindness Joseph received, every small success amidst his daily tasks, became a spark of light amidst the darkness. Sometimes hope manifests itself in small, almost imperceptible signs: a kind word, a watchful eye, an unexpected opportunity. Joseph learned to recognize these signs, to trust that God's timing is perfect, and that each trial is, in fact, a step toward the fulfillment of God's purpose. Perhaps you're experiencing times when hope seems distant, but pay close attention to the small signs around you. Inspire someone by sharing how you found strength in faith, even on the most difficult days. Let your experience serve as a reminder that even in adversity, God continues to build invisible paths of transformation and growth. The flames of the lamps cast long shadows across the walls of Potiphar's house, revealing every detail of the room and at the same time every tension in Joseph's heart. Perhaps you haven't felt it yet, but there are times when life seems to test our character silently, almost imperceptibly. It is in this space between what we see and what we feel that God works, shaping our souls through the choices we make. Joseph faced the pressure to maintain his integrity in the face of suspicious looks and veiled accusations. Each decision to remain faithful to what God had taught him was a silent declaration of courage. Sometimes, what seems like just a small act of resistance is actually the foundation of the character God wants to build. Even when the world around him seemed unfair, Joseph realized that every hardship held unseen lessons. Patience in the face of trials, faithfulness amid temptation, and trust when all seemed lost were signs that his spiritual journey was advancing, preparing him for greater challenges and the fulfillment of divine purpose. Perhaps you're going through moments that require difficult choices, silent tests of integrity. Notice how each decision, each act of faith, and each resistance to temptation is a step in building who you're becoming. Share with someone how small acts of courage can transform lives and create invisible paths of hope, showing that character forged in adversity always shines with God's light. The rising sun tinged the walls with gold, while the morning silence seemed to carry the weight of weeks of waiting. Jose observed every detail around him, perceiving the slowness of time as a silent challenge to his faith. Perhaps no one sees it, but patience is revealed most profoundly when we are tested in small things, in everyday gestures that seem insignificant. Every task accomplished, every suspicious glance that crossed his path became an opportunity to strengthen his spirit. Jose began to understand that waiting wasn't a loss, but preparation. Sometimes the greatest test comes not from grand events, but from how we respond to moments that demand constancy and inner strength. He learned to see subtle signs of God in small actions and coincidences, a kind gesture, an unexpected word, an opportunity that arose without warning. Active patience doesn't mean inaction. It means remaining faithful, attentive, and aware that every moment has value in building character and faith. Now look at your own journey. Every moment of silence, every obstacle, every situation that requires waiting is an opportunity for invisible growth. Inspire someone by sharing how silent perseverance transformed their outlook on life, showing that daily faithfulness, even when unnoticed, is the path through which God prepares greater destinies. The distant crackling of a fireplace echoed through the quiet hallway as Joseph reflected on the days he had already lived. You may not realize it, but there are times when God's understanding arrives silently, almost imperceptibly, revealing truths that only become clear after much patience and observation. Every hardship he faced, every injustice he endured, began to align before his eyes like pieces of a vast mosaic. He realized that nothing had happened by chance. Every closed door, every betrayal, every humiliation was a building block paving the way for something greater. The silence of waiting transformed into a voice that whispered purpose, shaping character and faith. Joseph learned that revelation isn't always overwhelming. Often it manifests itself in moments of introspection, in small details, and signs that go unnoticed by the hurried eye. It is in this space that the heart is formed, patience is rewarded, and trust in God becomes unshakable. As you navigate your own challenges, reflect on the small truths that emerge in the midst of everyday life. Notice the subtle signs of guidance, the gentleness of hope that arises when least expected, and allow these silent experiences to strengthen your faith. Share with someone how perception of the divine can manifest itself in subtleties, demonstrating that each moment of attention and sensitivity is a step toward building a greater purpose. The night wind blew through the columns of Potiphar's house, bringing with it the distant scent of the desert. Joseph walked the halls, each step silent, each breath marked by tension and reflection. You may never have felt it, but there are times when integrity is tested not in grand battles, but in the subtle details of everyday life, in the judgmental glances, in the decisions no one observes. Every action Joseph took, every choice to remain true to his convictions, even in the face of injustice, invisibly shaped his character. True strength comes not from external victories, but from the quiet courage to stand firm when everything conspires against us. And this is where we learn. Faithfulness in small acts becomes the solid foundation for the great purposes God has in store. He began to realize that his journey wasn't just about surviving, but about becoming an instrument of transformation. Each challenge, each trial, each obstacle endured with faith was preparation for greater responsibilities, for influencing lives and fulfilling the divine plan that was unfolding step by step. As you face your own trials, consider how small acts of honesty and steadfastness can reveal your true character. Inspire someone by sharing an example of integrity that transformed a situation or strengthened the faith of those around you. May your quiet choices serve as a reminder that faithfulness in small things is the invisible foundation of what God wants to accomplish. The first light of dawn filtered through the windows of Potiphar's house, casting faint rays over the silent hallways. Joseph felt the weight of time and waiting, each day bringing new challenges and small trials. Perhaps you haven't realized it yet, but perseverance isn't revealed only in great deeds. It blossoms in quiet constancy, in the courage to continue when no one is watching. Each gesture performed with attention, each responsibility assumed with integrity, became an invisible thread weaving the greater purpose. Jose began to realize that life rewards not only speed, but faithful persistence, the ability to keep going even without immediate signs of reward. He discovered that perseverance is also an internal discovery, a balance between hope and discipline, between courage and patience. Even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles, faith manifests itself when we remain steadfast in small decisions, when our hearts remain open to what God is silently forming. Look at your own journey and notice the seeds planted in silent days. Perhaps today you feel like nothing is changing, but each effort, each patient choice is putting down roots that will blossom in due time. May your calm presence, your steadfast attitude, be a reminder that God works in invisible ways, and that even the smallest gesture of perseverance has the power to transform entire paths. The evening shadows stretched through the corridors of Potiphar's house, and every movement seemed to amplify the silence that enveloped Joseph. You may never have realized it, but there are times when every decision, no matter how small, carries the weight of invisible worlds. Joseph discovered that life is made of silent choices, those that define not only the immediate path, but the essence of who we become. Every action he took, every obstacle he faced with courage, shaped not only his reputation, but also his heart. He learned that integrity is not just about resisting visible temptation, but also about remaining true to invisible convictions, those that no one sees but that God knows deeply. Even in situations that seemed unfair or meaningless, Jose realized that each choice was an opportunity for growth. What seemed simple, like deciding to serve with dedication or respond with patience, became a foundation that would support future challenges and open doors to greater purposes. As you reflect on your own decisions, consider the power that lies in conscious, silent choices. Allow your life to speak without words. Let each act of courage, each act of faith, be a visible sign of what is being shaped within. Remember that sometimes the quietest decision of all is the one that most influences destiny, and that even invisible acts carry eternal impact. Night was drawing to a close, and a faint light began to invade Joseph's silent room. You may not realize it, but there are moments when everything seems suspended, and it is precisely in those moments that God reveals his greater purpose. Joseph felt something awaken within him, a profound clarity that went beyond external circumstances and the injustices he had suffered. The trials that seemed to suffocate him became stepping stones to a broader understanding. Every challenge, every betrayal, and every moment of waiting began to make sense. He realized that what seemed like darkness was actually a mosaic that God was patiently forming, connecting every detail to create something extraordinary. Perhaps you're at a stage where you don't understand the reasons for your difficulties, but it's precisely at this point that the spiritual climax occurs, the silent revelation that every painful experience carries a lesson, and that divine purpose manifests when we trust fully, even without seeing it. Joseph felt an unexpected peace, a certainty that everything was being aligned to fulfill God's plan. As you journey through your own journey, recognize the moments when everything seems at a standstill, but inner transformation has already begun. Allow this clarity to inspire conscious and courageous decisions. May your life, even in silence, reveal signs of what God is doing behind the scenes, reminding you that every pain, every weight, is preparation for the fulfillment of something greater. The sun was rising on the horizon, casting golden rays over the streets of Egypt. Joseph walked through the palace corridors, but something had shifted in his heart. The weight of injustice and loneliness no longer defined him. Perhaps you haven't felt it yet, but there are times when restoration comes not as a spectacular event, but as a quiet awakening that illuminates what once seemed lost. Every challenge endured, every humiliation overcome, became a silent testimony to God's transforming power. Joseph realized that the closed doors, the betrayals, and the endless waiting had not been obstacles, but instruments to hone his character and prepare him for what was to come. Life finally revealed that God's delay is not denial, but preparation. As he observed the movement around him, Joseph felt gratitude for each moment that shaped him. The wounds of the past had not disappeared, but now they were scars that told stories of faith, resilience, and transformation. He understood that divine purpose is fully fulfilled when we learn to trust, hope, and act with integrity, even when all seems lost. Look at your own life and realize how each painful experience, each setback, and each challenge contributed to your growth. Allow your silent story to inspire others to see the value in perseverance and faithfulness. May the restoration you experience be a testament to divine care, showing that God transforms pain into purpose and prepares paths of redemption even when no one notices. The night sky was lit with stars, each bright spot reminding Joseph that there is a greater plan for every life. You may never have realized it, but the most difficult journeys hold silent revelations that only become clear when faith remains steadfast. Joseph now saw the complete mosaic. Every betrayal, every weight, and every obstacle were pieces that built his destiny. He understood that God works behind the scenes, transforming pain into learning, silence into wisdom, and injustice into preparation. Restoration is not just a return to what was lost, but an elevation, a calling to fulfill a purpose that surpasses human comprehension. What hurt yesterday builds tomorrow. What seemed like defeat reveals itself as a silent victory. As you journey through your own story, allow hope to blossom in the most unexpected corners. See challenges as silent teachers, and each waiting period as a seed of transformation. May the light of divine purpose illuminate your path, revealing that each moment lived has meaning, and that God is always shaping character and opening doors to what lies ahead. Let this reflection inspire your heart to remain attentive to life's subtleties. May every act of faith, every silent decision, and every act of courage become a reminder that, even in the shadows, God's plan continues to unfold, preparing you to fulfill your destiny.